All right, welcome back everyone to the 2086 My League mode 32 team rebuild. We're in round one of the 2086 playoffs. Louisville Liberty, number 1 seed Louisville Liberty versus the 8th seed Washington Wizards. And we just had a hell of a game, folks. And it looks like Louisville Liberty will be moving on to something else for the next round.
And they're going to move on to the semifinal.
They are
just rolling now. Round one, 4 games to 1.
Low that a little bit, but yes, it is the end of the road for the Washington Wizards. They are going home. They are going to Cancun. Whatever. They are free to do what they want, as they will not be playing any more NBA basketball for the rest of this season. They are eliminated. So yeah, man. Calvin Goodrich had a fantastic game, 42 points. He's always dropping 40-something points in the playoffs. This is nothing new for him. You know, this is very, this is very part of his character. You know, this is a personality trait at this point. This team has already won 4 championships, so they really have nothing left to prove. Although the last championship they won was in 2082, it is now 2086. So the last championship they won was 4 years ago. Goodrich is 35. You know, the team is getting up there in age. He's 35. May is 34. Mitch is 33, 31. Carney is what, 32. So yeah, this team is getting up there in age. Hines is 33. How old is Griffin? Where's he at? Griffin came off the bench with 22 points today. Let's look at these highlights. This is exactly why we got Griffin on the team. We traded away a bunch of depth for basically an all-star type of guy, a borderline all-star type of guy to come off our bench, and that was really a good idea. Hines, he had what, four threes, 4 for 4 from 3. Come on, man. This is fantastic. Louisville Liberty will be moving on to the second round. Now the Washington Wizards, I believe I explained them before, but if not, I can give a quick rundown. They drafted him. Oh yeah, I did explain them. But yeah. So Lamont Powers, yeah, none of these guys are really the superstar that Washington wanted. Reggie Isley is fine. Lamont Powers is fine, but they just need someone to take them over the top. They just need a superstar. Hopefully, maybe Ruben Harrison can develop into a superstar. He's already really good. 10 rebounds, 20 points, 3 blocks. Like, he had a very good playoff series. He had a good playoff run. So did Cam Higgins. But we just need this team to glow up a little bit more. We're still, I would say we're still kind of rebuilding, but, we should be out of our rebuild by now. He was drafted 6 years ago. He was drafted 9 years ago. Like, we should be out of our rebuild at this point. We still have some young guys. He's, year 4. Harrison is only year 3. Howland is only year 2. So is Lawson. Yes, you know what I'm saying? So we got some guys that are still young. And so we're not old team. It's not time to hit the panic button by any means. But, hopefully we can still progress for the Washington Wizards. As for the Louisville Liberty, however, like I said, they're a little bit old, but they are open, man. They knocked the series out in 5. Washington had a very good they had a very good series, although Washington played very well. This team is kind of beat to beat. It's kind of constructed to beat Louisville. And so, obviously that didn't happen, however. Look at some of these highlights. Harvey Carney, he had 27 points, 18 assists, hooping, going crazy. He was a 28th pick in the draft. I can look at it in a second which draft exactly because I don't remember, but it was probably like 74. 73, it was something like that. I'm pretty sure it was 74, actually. Look at that. Pull up 3, wet. Pull up 3, wet. Steal, block. Look at this guy. Yep, 74, I was right. Yeah, he came off the bench first couple years behind Drew Haywood, and now he's been a perennial all-star type of guy. Multiple-time champion already, obviously. He's developed into a fantastic player. And then Griffin, we drafted him 2073. He was actually starting over Carney. Ironically enough, back then. But Griffin ended up getting traded to Houston. You guys know the story. And yeah, so this is the team. So let's go ahead and say goodbye to Washington, unfortunately for them. They will be headed home. They got some they still got some young guys that they can develop, so I'm not really worried about them. Hopefully they could probably stand to find another backup center to replace Cam Higgins, as he's getting kind of old. They want Archer Lawson to pan out and be decent. They hope this Dylan Rose guy can be decent. He was a mid-first round pick. So, they got some pieces still, but all right, let's go ahead and move on to the Minnesota Timberwolves and the New Orleans Pelicans. Now, these two have some very interesting stories. I'm gonna get into the backstory before we hop into the game. The backstory behind these teams, man. Tim Sutton, man. This guy is 38 years old and he's still hooping. Well, he was hooping in the regular season at least, but he's been in Minnesota since 2069. He was the 18th overall pick back then, and he's seen every single iteration of, they've rebuilt so many times, and he's been there the entire time. He's a 2-time MVP, a 14-time All-Star, 5-time All-NBA first team. 2-time second-team All-NBA and third-team All-NBA once, as well as All-Rookie first team. He might have even won Rookie of the Year. I'm not sure. He probably did. Look at these numbers. He came out the gate swinging. He's a 2-time MVP, like I said. 0-time champion, though, as you can see. He's been in the league for 17 years. He's been in Minnesota for 17 years. He's looking like he's going to hang it up. I might not allow that, but, yeah. So he's staying loyal to the soil. But they're still the number 2 seed currently. Tim Sutton has been hooping, and it's because of this guy right here, Otis Chambers. My goodness, what a player. He was drafted 12th overall 3 years ago, and he's already a 2-time All-Star and a 1-time All-NBA member and the Rookie of the Year. He's only been in the league 3 years, people. 3 years. These are the numbers. He came in immediately, putting up 27 a game, 30, 32. Are you serious? 2nd team All-NBA. He's already a top 10 player in the league. Like, he just stepped foot in the league. And then we got Randolph Jennings, who was the 8th pick in the 2nd round, 2073. And he didn't even play until 2074. But yeah, he was a 2nd round pick, power forward, and he just, man, he worked his ass off, man, and he got to this type of player where he's a multiple-time All-Star, multiple-time All-NBA player, you know, from a 2nd round pick. You know, we just drafted him. We saw the work ethic, we saw the potential in him, and we just developed him, you know, and he's been fantastic. He's delivered some excellent performances for us. And this team actually made the NBA Finals back in 2081, I believe, against the Louisville Liberty, where they lost. They probably lost. We can check. Let's see. And I want you guys to see this stuff too, you know, these records and all that. But yeah, yes, there we are. Sorry, blind. Yes, Darren Griffith actually won. What? No, that's wrong. Calvin Goodrich has 3 of the Finals MVPs. Griffith only has 1, which is this one. But yeah. So as you can see, the Louisville Liberty beat Minnesota. They swept them in the Finals, 2081. And since then, like, Chambers wasn't even drafted back then. And so, since then, they've had a complete retooling. Their roster is nowhere near the same. Peter McGuire, he is their starting point guard. He started off in Dallas. Oh, shoot, I forgot about that. He started off in Dallas, putting up 26 a game. He got hella minutes that year. Yes, 36. But he wasn't super efficient, was he? No, not really. 60%. I mean, that's good, but for that amount of points, you'd like it to be a little bit more. But 22 points after that. He's not really getting a lot of assists. And nowadays, like, 6 assists is not that good for a point guard nowadays in the NBA. Like, this should give you guys some perspective. These are the type of, not even just playoffs, but just league leaders for the season. These are the type of numbers point guards are putting up right now. If you want to be a starting point guard in this league, you have to average double-digit assists, at least 9.5 or something. These are the type of numbers people put up in this league, just to give you some perspective. So 6 to 7 assists per game is not that good. And so Dallas, they drafted him 5th overall. This was back when they had a whole different team, and they were kind of transitioning away from that team because they were contenders, but you know, they started being kind of bad. They started regressing and stuff. So he was their first pick of that rebuild. So he was on this team with Wade Randall and all them. He was on this team. They shipped him off to Houston for Darren Griffith, actually. Not Griffith, Griffin. Him. So, yes, they shipped him off right here to Houston for Darren Griffith. And so, Dallas had Peter McGuire. They traded him to Dallas, and they got back Darren Griffin. And so, yes, that was this year. Yep. Because this year's like, yes, he's putting up points, but he's not being the assist man they need. He's not super duper efficient. You know, he's fine. That's definitely serviceable, but he's not super, like 59%. Like, he's still in the 50s. Like this is fine, yes. See, he started hooping when he got to Houston. Now look at this. 67, 69, like high 60s when he was in Houston. But when he was in Dallas, he was in low 60s, high 50s. And so they ended up trading him away because he wasn't really what they thought he was supposed to. He wasn't what they wanted, right? They traded him away to Houston. And Houston, he has some good times. They ended up making the conference finals one of these years. Like one of them. It might have been 83 or 84, whatever. But he was the starter. It was him and Jeffrey Jones, who is still there. Yep, Jeffrey Jones. Like they're both like good point guards, and they're kind of switching off. But Jeffrey Jones had to start, and McGuire was coming off the bench, and he's like a 6'5" point guard, and so he was kind of a good little match at 6'4", but he was a good matchup off the bench for opposing point guards. So he's in Houston hooping, and Houston, like he showed that he didn't want to be there anymore. Like his morale was getting low, and he was tired of coming off the bench and all that. And so they needed a little shake up anyway. And so they traded him to Minnesota. But before that, Minnesota. So in the last episode, I covered the Washington Wizards and how they had Murray Graves. He's not the Kings. Where's he at? He's in Houston. So he was in Minnesota for years. They traded. So he was in Sacramento. He gets traded. So first he was in Washington. He gets traded to Sacramento for Amanatides, who, if you don't know, is this guy down here. So right here, that's when Murray Graves was traded from Washington to Sacramento, because he was the guy traded for him. And so we get to the Kings. Hold on. What I have to say. I was in Houston. Yeah. So we get to the Kings, and he was traded to Minnesota for Trevor Anderson and some other stuff. Who is their current backup center? And Trevor Anderson in Minnesota, he was a part of that right here. It's 2081. He was a part of that NBA Finals run that they made. So Minnesota made the finals in 2081, and Trevor Anderson was a starting point guard. No, I'm sorry, power forward. He was a starting power forward alongside their guy, Nate McCoy. Where's he at? Boom. There he is. Yes. So yeah, he was in Phoenix at first, and he was traded to Minnesota for a guy named Brandon Hunter and OJ Sanders, I believe. You guys know who that is, but so yeah, so here he is. He was in Minnesota again. He was there for that championship run, and so the year after they kind of regressed a little bit. He gets shipped off to Charlotte for a guy named Tyson Manning and some other pieces. I'll show you, boom, right here. Yeah, so he was in Charlotte for a lot of those years. He gets traded to Minnesota for Nate McCoy and stuff. So he's there in Minnesota for a little while, for all these years, right? Since 2082 to 86. And so, yeah, man. So they traded McCoy to, Charlotte traded McCoy to Portland for who was that for? I think it was for Lonnie Foster, if I'm mistaken. For this guy. Yeah. Yes. So Lonnie Foster was in Portland, and then he gets traded to Charlotte for Nate McCoy, who we just showed. But sorry, that was way too in depth. The point is, Nate McCoy was the starting power forward alongside Trevor Anderson and Tim Sutton and and Tim Sutton and a guy named Jamie Moore and a guy named what's his name? Joshua Rose. Yes, that was his name. And so they made the finals, whatever, 2081. The next year, they start falling off a little bit. Oh, yeah, and obviously, Randolph Jennings. Sorry if the story's a little bit all over the place, but they made the finals this year. And then the next year, they fell off a little bit. And so the following year, 2083, that is when they traded for a guy named, let me see. No, 2082, they traded for a guy named Sean Lucas. Again, who I talked about this in the last episode, but they traded this guy, Barney Little. Ironically, he's back on the team, but he was in Minnesota in 2082. He was traded for Sean Lucas, who was a former MVP, and he was very old, but he was still good. And so they did their thing in 2082. They lost in like the second or third round or whatever. And then 2084, basically all these years they kept losing. And so they were decent. And so they get the 12th overall pick in 2083 because they kind of fell off a little bit. They weren't contenders anymore. So they get a lottery pick. They draft this guy who was going to be a top 10 pick, but he didn't have the greatest physical tools. I mean, he's 6'6", he's a shooting guard, which is good, but he was very slight, 180 something. He's up to 195 now, but still kind of slight for a 6'6" guy. But yeah, he was 180 something, and all he could do was shoot. He couldn't even play defense at the time. But he's obviously shattered all those critics, you know. And so now Randolph Jennings is here, and he's been here, and so they got this formidable team, and they traded Tyson Manning, who we talked about earlier, for Roland O'Neal. Tyson Manning is one of the guys for this guy, Roland O'Neal, who was in Houston at first. He gets traded to Utah he gets traded to Utah alongside Devin Cooper, who I'll show you. Where's he at? Right here. So I believe they were traded together, 80-81. Yeah. Roland O'Neal was a top 5 pick. He was supposed to be a dominant center. He really wasn't immediately out the gate, but he's needed some time to develop, man. So yeah, they get traded to Utah together for a guy named Wally Butler and who's the other guy? Dang it, I forgot. But anyway, Wally Butler is this guy. He was drafted to Utah 10th overall. His rookie year, he was traded for Roland O'Neal and Devin Cooper and all that. And so they were in Utah together. And then this year, 2082, they made the finals. Utah made the finals. Roland O'Neal was there with Juan Carlos Canales. They made the finals, and yeah, he was the backup center, but he played very well in that run. And then he gets traded to Utah. He gets traded from Utah to Miami. After that, the following year, 2083, they were off to a little bit of a slower start because the guys were kind of getting older and regressing, and Juan Carlos is already old. And so they ended up trading Roland O'Neal and some other guys for this guy named Hakeem Udoh, who I showed you in the other video. He was in Miami for a long time. He was really good. And so they traded him to Utah for Roland O'Neal and some other stuff. And so, I explained that story in that video, so go watch that if you want to know. But so basically, Roland O'Neal, he's in Miami for all these years, and he wasn't really putting up the great stats. Like I said, in this league, you want to be a starting point, power forward or center on a championship team, you need at least 8 to 9 rebounds a game and at least like 1.5 blocks. So he wasn't really doing that. But this year, he was doing it. 8 rebounds, 1.4 blocks is close enough. And so Minnesota, and he's 7-2. Minnesota said, fuck it. Let's trade for him. They got some picks and all that. They got Terrence Rose from Brooklyn, last year. I forgot what they gave up to Brooklyn to get him, but it wasn't very much because he was just taking up space in Brooklyn. They needed to clear the logjam. They had a lot of centers. They had Rudolph Pierce, Ron Poole. They had, this guy, Arif. They had a lot of centers. And so they traded him away. They traded away Terrence Rose. Yes, we traded Martin Turner for him. Yes, he was in Minnesota. We traded him as well as some other guys. But anyway, we got Terrence Rose coming off our bench. He's a good shot blocker, as you can see. And So yeah, he was in Phoenix for a little bit, and then he was in Brooklyn, and he really found his home in Brooklyn, and then now he's here contributing on the championship team. He averaged 70% true shooting percentage throughout the season, so he's really good, very efficient. J.R. Ryder they got from Brooklyn actually in that trade, who's been very solid for them off their bench. Zach Mann he's been all over the place. And actually, the story with him is that I do all the drafts in this simulation, right? I do all the draft picks of every single team, every season. And Zach Mann was actually supposed to be the 10th pick of that 2083 draft. He's supposed to be drafted 10th overall to the New York Knicks, and he's supposed to be good. But I accidentally simmed through the draft or something by accident. That was the one year that I ever did it. And so he ended up being, and I didn't put him in the draft board. I didn't get to that. I meant to, but I didn't. So he ended up just naturally through the simulation going in the sixth pick in the second round. So he never really had the career that he could have had I done it correctly. But he's still really good though. Not really good. He's still decent. He's had a very long career though, bouncing around the team, always been pretty efficient. So, and then Wally Red is a Memphis legend. He put up all these points per game. They ended up making the finals in 2077, along with Gregory Jefferson and Harry Blair and all those guys. And I showed you them before, but yeah, he's a 4-time All-Star, 9-time All-Defensive Player, and Rookie of the Year. So put some respect on his name. But yeah, now he's in Minnesota. He was traded away from Memphis this year because he was getting kind of old and they're trying to rebuild and stuff. So he was traded, and he's still pretty good off their bench. Derek Nicholson, he doesn't really play. He's not that good anymore. But yeah, so they really have a short bench. The rest of these guys are not playoff rotation caliber, really. And Jason Weber, he was a Louisville Liberty. He was supposed to be like a little up and comer for them. He's even an NBA champion. So, but yeah, Sutton was drafted here. McGuire, yeah. So I didn't even finish. So he was in Houston, and he was hooping or whatever. He got sick of it. They kind of needed to trade him away. And so what Minnesota did, I have the screenshots, but they basically got together some of their assets. They traded for a guy named Lawrence Madison, who was right here. He was in Detroit all these years. He actually played with Juan Carlos Chavez for a little bit. And so, but after Juan Carlos Chavez left right here, after he left, he got some time to shine. And so he was putting up all these great numbers and stuff. And he actually helped the Pistons make the conference finals and make the second round and stuff in the playoffs after Juan Carlos Chavez left them, which was a surprise. Nobody thought they were going to make the playoffs after they lose the GOAT, but they did because of him and some other guys. But they had a really wonky lineup. They had him at the point guard. They had a guy named Louis Ware at the shooting guard, and then they had Sam Augustine, who's a 6'4" shooting guard at the small forward. So they had, they had Louis Ware, who's really a point guard, who was really hooping at the time. He kind of fell off a cliff recently, but at the time he was hooping. So he was a shooting guard, and then they had Sam Augustine as the starting small forward right here. He was hooping. But that was a very small lineup, obviously. So they had to make some trades. And ever since then, it's been a little bit of a weird fit in Detroit because Lawrence Madison is only a 6'2" point guard. And Detroit, they had a lot of point guards. They had this guy right here, Gregor Bender, was their late first-round pick, but he really has emerged as a very good guard. So it was really hard to manage the minutes between him, and Madison, and then the other little guards off their bench. And so it took a while. And he was there for years, but they finally traded him away to Minnesota originally. So he was in Minnesota for a hot second. It was a 3-team trade, but they didn't get anything from Minnesota specifically. But Pistons traded Lawrence Madison to the Timberwolves to basically offload his contract and get him off the team. And they got some stuff for him or whatever. So he was in Minnesota, and they packaged him with Murray Graves right here in order to get Peter McGuire. So Murray Graves, he was in Houston with Lawrence Madison for a second. So they're both in Minnesota. Murray Graves and Lawrence Madison were both in Minnesota. They get traded to Houston for Peter McGuire, who was the starting point guard of Houston's conference finals run a couple years ago. And so this team needed a point guard because for the past couple years, Tim Sutton had been running the point guard. Even though he's a shooting guard, he's really a shooting guard. But he's been running the point guard because Joshua Rose, who was their point guard when they made the finals, he had retired because he was old. So he retired, and so Tim Sutton was forced to play the point guard. And that's not his natural position. And he was getting old too, so he really couldn't be handling the load as the point guard. So they needed a point guard to play with him, and they wanted to slide Otis Chambers to the 3. And Randolph Jennings is really the best at the 4. He's had seasons where he plays the 3 and he's good at the 3, but he's really his best at the 4, even though he's undersized at 6'10". But it works because Roland O'Neal is 7'2", so that kind of offsets. That's why they got him specifically. But Peter McGuire, 6'4" point guard, he was already proven. He's a starter on a conference finals team, and so they made that trade for him, and the team has been doing very well. So, that's the team. Zach Mann, he was traded from Louisville. He had a decent little season over there. He was actually in Louisville this season, but he just didn't play, so he doesn't show up. But he was coming off the bench, he didn't play. And so they got Zach Mann as a part of some big trade, and he was like a throw-in because he wasn't playing anyway. So he was just a throw-in, and they needed a backup point guard. So they said, just give us to him. Give him to us. They said, fuck it, here, you have him. You can have him. He wasn't playing for us anyway. So, same thing with Wally Wade. He was in Memphis, but he wasn't really playing that much. So Minnesota's like, here, give him to us. And I'm like, okay. So here they are. And then New Orleans. Now, Dave Martin was in Miami for many, many years. He's a Miami legend. And retired his jersey, I'm sure. And he was traded to New Orleans for Doug Wesley. He was out in Toronto, actually. But he was traded for Doug Wesley. Yes, he was in New Orleans. And right here, Miami, they traded him for Doug Wesley, who was a young guy. He was like 24 at the time. And they needed like a small forward or whatever. And they were they had a team, they had a good team, and they were ready to rebuild. So they traded away Dave Martin, traded away Edward Hines, who was a part of that Miami team, along with Dave Martin. Where's he at? Boom, right here. It was Dave Martin, Edward Hines, Hakeem Udoh, and then they had a guy named Juwan Anthony, who's since retired, and they had this guy right here, Antoine Carter. Where's he at? Boom, right here. Yep. So that was their little team for many years. They made the conference finals once. They had a lot of battles in the playoffs with the Louisville Liberty and the Chicago Bulls, and they had a lot of battles. Brooklyn Nets, they had a lot of battles throughout the years. But they never got it done. So they ended up trading him to New Orleans for Doug Wesley. And they drafted Matt Hughes 2081. They drafted Chicky in 2076. So that was a minute ago. But yeah, he's been up and down, in and out the starting lineup throughout his career. Lynn Lane, now he has a very interesting story. He was drafted to Indiana as a second round pick, 19th overall. Not 19th overall, but 19th in the second round. And he came out the gate 10 points a game, right? Then 16 and 9, 17 and 9, 19 and 9, you know what I'm saying? So he was hooping. But he wasn't blocking that many. Like he fit the criteria, and they were making the playoffs, right? They were making the playoffs all these years because Lynn Lane fit the criteria of what I previously stated. But he wasn't doing much in the playoffs. Like, he helped them get to the playoffs, but he wasn't doing very much when they got there. He was kind of the weak link, and he kind of prevented them from going that far. And he was like the fourth or fifth. He was a fifth option on offense. So he wasn't really given that much opportunity, but he could score, and he was efficient with the touches that he did get. They ended up trading him away to Indiana. It's only because they had a lot of, to New Orleans. He was in Indiana, but he was traded to New Orleans because they had a lot of centers. They drafted this guy, Deion Clayton, 7th overall, 2079. So they had him, they had Burt Porter, who was a starting center alongside Lynn Lane all those years. And they had, obviously, this guy, Amon Tedis, who's kind of regressed since then, but he was the starter for those years. So it was really kind of getting jam-packed in the front court. And they really needed a backup point guard that was like all-star caliber. And they thought that Charles Gill would be right in for the job. He was averaging 25 points a game in New Orleans. So they made the trade. They traded Lynn Lane for Charles Gill. Charles Gill has since fallen out of the rotation. He's since fallen out of the rotation in Indiana. But Lynn Lane, however, in New Orleans has been absolutely hooping and has exceeded all expectations. Like, he came in New Orleans and now he has started averaging 22 and 10. Then he just kept going up 26, 28, 33 this year. No one thought that he was going to be anything near this. 13 All-NBA All-Star for the first time this year. Carrying them to the playoffs. Colin Martin, solid starting center in the league. Drafted 11th overall, 2079. Gerard Robinson was in Miami. He was traded alongside Dave Martin to New Orleans. He's a decent backup point guard. And like what I said in my last episode with the the Boston Celtics, he was drafted to Phoenix, and he was traded to Boston for Christopher Sullivan, who is, there he is. So as you can see, 79-80. He was in Boston all these years. He didn't pan out. He was the first overall pick, but he was traded to Phoenix, where he now comes off the bench, and they won a championship actually not too long ago, so that worked out. But anyway, Gerard Robinson was a big piece of that trade because he was a young star, drafted 12th overall, so he was in Phoenix hooping, whatever. He gets traded to Boston, and he was there for a little bit. He's their backup point guard. He signs with Miami, has a good year. He's traded to New Orleans, and now here he is, and he's been very efficient, like his whole career. He's been pretty efficient his whole career, except for that first stint in Phoenix. They drafted Ray Stone, 7th overall, 2082. They wanted him to really be right here where Chicky is, but he hasn't panned out the way they wanted. JT Patterson, they traded him over. They got him from Lakers after trading away Alexander Owens, who was their last superstar of the last era. He was in New Orleans for many years, putting up a lot of points. They made the playoffs a couple times, didn't really do much. But he was traded to the Lakers for James Patterson and some other picks and some other guys, right? So, not James Patterson, JT Patterson. So here he is. And then they drafted him, 16th overall. He's going to be good. He drafted him with the second round pick. Hopefully he can turn into something. They drafted him 16th overall a few years ago. He hasn't been shit. He's been a complete bust, unfortunately. And then those are just random signings. But so yeah, they drafted him, and they traded for Lynn Lane. They traded for Lynn Lane and Dave Martin, and they traded for him. And then they signed Kelvin Ingram, who was decent in Atlanta all these years, but nothing crazy. But he's been a bright spot for them. He averaged 19 throughout the regular season. He lost the starting spot during the playoffs, but that's just how it goes. And so yeah, so here they are. They're down 3-1, so they're gonna lose. Minnesota has the upper hand, but that's just how it goes, man. This is a good little matchup though. It's good for New Orleans to get some experience Even though this team is actually kind of old, they have old mixed with new, so I don't really know where they go from here. Actually, hopefully Ray Stone can still, progress. He's shown some good potential, so that's good, but he hasn't been anything crazy. Lynn Lane is already 30, so it's not like we're rebuilding. It's not like we're a young team necessarily, even though we have young guys. We're not a super young team, so we're just gonna ride out, see how long Lynn Lane can keep up this play. They're probably not gonna trade him, so they're probably just gonna see how long this can go. Just ride it out over there. Hopefully, this Perry guy can take over Dave Martin's spot. He's getting pretty old, so yeah, that's the rundown of these two teams. I try to keep it kind of brief, but there's a lot of the history here. So again, I do every single trade, every single draftee, every single team, every single year.
Taking a look at Minnesota.
So I know all. I am the overseer of this league.
A chance for them to close out the series here.
You can watch a couple minutes here and end the episode right here. Comment down below if you guys want to see more gameplay footage, actual gameplay footage when we play the games. And if you want to see the footage or you just want to simulate it. So Wolves is in the lead right now. Good defense. Rookie, second round pick. It gets tapped out.
Here's man.
Buster's in, but he has good defense. That's why he's in the game right now. He plays good defense there. JT Patterson with the block. See what happens. Drops in the rim. Oh, okay. Bad pass, but it doesn't matter.
Defensively, you can't.
Austin Aldridge with a nice finish.
Well, that might be why their deficit is what it is right now.
It's a backbreaker for your
Zach
defense.
Man with the ball here. See what he does.
Like that.
Here's man. Just 5 to shoot.
He was traded here this season.
With the fadeaway.
Trade deadline.
It's all in by Patterson.
Wow, that's one you just gotta assume is going in.
Simpson. See
Tough
what he
luck.
does.
I pushed Aldridge.
Aldridge passes to Patterson. Back to Simpson.
There's the screen. Driving in.
Pick and roll. Oh, he kicks it out. Oh, turnover. He couldn't catch it. Couldn't catch it. That was good pass. Good idea there, Simpson.
Oh,
That man gets to the rim. He gets it blocked.
And he'll go to the line.
Patterson gets it blocked. He's called for the foul.
And some stats here, guys. The scoring breakdown for New Orleans.
They didn't need any time to warm up from long range today. Their three-point shooting has been terrific in the first half.
Another positive has been their play in the paint offensively.
He probably would. He's a very good free throw shooter. Over at least 80%, if not 90.
And he drops it first.
That man has had a nice little career, man. He's been around the league. He finds himself in Minnesota. He finds himself in Minnesota somehow. He was in Louisville, he was in Atlanta. He was in all kinds of places. He was in LA, he was in the Lakers for a little bit.
That one falls, so he hits both of them.
He's living there tonight. A tough guy to guard without fouling. And the bonus, he's going to knock it down.
He's like a solid defender. Solid to
Outside Ingram.
Solid to average. He's been above average.
Drives to the hoop. Rebound by Ryder.
I'm not sure what happened on that play. May have relaxed a little bit once he got to the rim.
Yeah, Ryder.
That's to Red. To the inside. And he was fouled while in the act of shooting, so he'll take 2 free throws.
Everyone in the building saw the obvious contact. At the line for the Timberwolves. At the line for 2.
First free throw's good.
Yeah, he shoots about 70% true shooting, so you know that he's a very good free throw shooter.
And so Rose knocks him both down.
When your bigs can make free throws, it's a huge advantage. Love his approach to getting to the line.
That's the Simpson, see what he does.
Back to Ingram.
Pump fakes.
Pass to Patterson.
Pass it to Stone. Pass it to Patterson. Back to Ingram.
Takes a 3.
Ingram is not a shot. He misses. Rebounded by Jennings. Go, push the pace a little bit. They're down 2.
Here's man. Out
Gets
to the
the
right
paint.
wing.
Kicks it out to Jennings. Oh, he takes a step in and breaks it.
Tie it up. Is that
Takes a
what
step
this
into
is?
the defense for some reason. I feel like that.
Moved away. Fast break. Here we go.
They're all right in the corner. Kicks it back out to
Here's
Zach,
Red.
Wally
Looking
Red.
for his first basket still in
He
this
got to the
one.
paint. Oh,
So, 2 free throws. He was fouled in the act of shooting.
For a rookie center. Second round pick. Basically, 2 shots. Actually playing this. Actually.
And he makes the first. And it's tied up with that one.
They got Jennings in the bench. Okay, Simpson, let's see what you can do.
With 1 on the clock.
Okay. So yeah, that's gonna end off the episode for now. I will see you guys next time. Hope you guys enjoyed. Comment down below before to see you next, and I will see you next time. Peace.